I don't want to do this. This is literally the worst punishment you can give to someone. How can a show go from so good to so freaking bad? Especially a show that I have loved my entire life. Why, Nick? Why would you do this to SpongeBob? Yeah, okay, might as well just get it out of the way. Hello everyone and welcome to Uncommon Reviews. I am your host, the Uncommon SBF. Now, last review I counted down my top 20 favorite episodes from one of my all-time favorite shows, SpongeBob SquarePants. The show started off so good, with the first 3 seasons being regarded as some of the best in cartoon history. However, after the release of the 2004 theatrical SpongeBob movie, the show started to go downhill, to the point where it is now just another generic, unfunny, average Nickelodeon show that should have ended a long time ago.
After the release of the movie, the show was supposed to end, but Nick renewed it for a 4th season as a result of the film's success. Due to this, the creator of the show, Steven Hillenburg, stepped down as executive producer because he felt the show should have ended with the movie. Due to his departure, the new writers have made the show gradually unfunnier as the years go by, with some saying that the show has now gone from amazing to complete shit. And yeah, they're kinda right. Though I do think the show began to get bad later than most people, which for me was around 2007, I still think it can have the occasional streak of good episodes every once in a while. But now it's come to the point where the majority of the episodes just aren't good. And that's why this is a list of my top 10 worst SpongeBob episodes.
Now you're probably wondering why this is only a top 10 instead of a top 20. Simple. Although the show has declined in quality in recent years, I still find more episodes of the show to be good rather than bad. Therefore, a top 20 wouldn't really make sense. Also, this is not just a list of the post-movie episodes. This is counting the entire series, so pre-movie episodes can qualify to be on the worst of list. Also, specials such as Atlantis SquarePants and Truthy Square are not eligible to be on this list because they were regarded as TV movies by Nickelodeon when they first aired. However, if Atlantis SquarePants did end up on the list, it would probably be in the top 3 worst. So, with that said, time to recollect on one of the darkest eras of SpongeBob. This is the top 10 worst SpongeBob episodes. What a better way to start off the worst list than talking about one of the grossest episodes the show has ever put out.
Number 10 is The Splinter. Due to the graphic images shown in this episode, people tend to find this episode to be gross and disgusting, which gets even more gross as it goes on. And to top it all off, the episode sucks, too. The episode revolves around SpongeBob getting a splinter after trying to get his spatula unstuck from the ceiling. As the day goes on, the splinter gets larger and more gross, but he tries to hide it from Mr. Krabs so he won't get the day off from work. He goes to Patrick for help since Patrick is the greatest doctor ever, you knew. Don't you remember how he cured SpongeBob of the suds?
Don't touch me, I'm sterile!
However, since SpongeBob is an idiot for ever trusting that dumbass, Patrick just makes it worse and SpongeBob runs into Mr. Krabs and Squidward. Krabs pulls the splinter out, and after Squidward learns that he can get hurt and still get paid, he hurts himself only to find out that his shift was already over a few minutes ago. They just had to throw in the Squidward torture at the end, didn't they? Not only is this one of the stupidest episodes in the show's history, but they just managed to increase the gross imagery throughout the entire episode for no particular reason. It doesn't really bother me as much as others, but it's still not the greatest thing to look at, and it doesn't help that the episode is terrible as well. In the end, if you ever need medical attention, don't fucking call Patrick.
I really don't want to talk about this episode, but I have to. Stuck in the ringer.
You know, something I really hate about the post-movie episodes is how several characters have been dumbed down or given traits that they barely had in the pre-movie episodes. And Stuck in the Ringer is a prime example of the characters being complete fucking idiots. In this episode, SpongeBob gets stuck in his ringer after falling in the shower.
I've fallen, and I can't get up.
And asks Patrick to help him get out of it. However, since Patrick is a complete fucking dunce in the post-movie episodes, he covers the ringer in forever glue, which makes SpongeBob more stuck in the ringer than before, making things much worse for him.
I'm sorry, why the fuck would someone think that's a good idea? Patrick, it is impossible for you to be this stupid.
So due to Patrick's stupidity, SpongeBob struggles to do everyday tasks throughout the day. And after having enough, he snaps at Patrick at a carnival and ends their friendship. Of course, the way the people treated SpongeBob for this was completely uncalled for and completely hypocritical, but I'm not even gonna touch that. Patrick tries to live without his best friend, but he can't take it and goes to SpongeBob's house to find him no longer having the will to live.
And now, for quite possibly one of the stupidest endings ever.
The two begin to cry until they realize tears melt the glue, so they cry until the ringer slides off of SpongeBob, which also shaves his beard, and things are back to normal. God, this episode is just stupid. The plot is completely fucking stupid, and the events could have been easily avoided had Patrick suddenly not lost his brain. It's a perfect example of a post-movie episode that's just plain bad and dumb, and it shouldn't have even been fucking greenlit.
Alright, what's number 8?
You know, Squidward wasn't always a complete fucking punching bag like he is now. He never had the greatest luck in the classic episodes, but at least he had a few episodes where good things happened to him. But for some reason, the writers of the post-movie episodes will not allow Squidward to have a single bit of happiness and is constantly tortured and abused by SpongeBob and Patrick in nearly every fucking new episode. These episodes have been labeled by fans as Squidward torture porns, and although each character has plenty of these episodes in the new episodes, Squidward is the most prominent example of these episodes, and nearly all of these are some of the absolute worst episodes in the entire series, and one of the worst is my number 8 choice. The episode revolves around SpongeBob and Patrick finding out that Squidward is a member of an exclusive club that's basically a fucking cult, and of course, they find a way to get him kicked out of it. To make up for Squidward getting the axe, SpongeBob and Patrick make their own club and make Squidward a member, but after that fails, they try to get Squidward back in the club by making him seem like a hero, but that also fails. So in the end, Squidward is left with nothing except 2 fucking idiots forcing him into their club. Why can't he just catch a damn break? This episode is a prime example of one of those that just won't let Squidward get anything in his life, and makes the 2 idiots seem like the people you're supposed to hate, not the ones you're supposed to love. Not to mention the fact that this episode's completely fucking dumb, and the only semi-decent part is the initiation scene with the jellyfish. That is it.
Somebody already had feather buddies.
Yeah, those feather buddies better hope they don't run into us in a dark alley.
Oh god, it is so hard to talk about this. But the worst part is that there are still 7 more episodes that are worse than this. This is gonna be a long fucking day. Post-movie Mr. Krabs somehow manages to be the cheapest fucking individual of all time. To the most extreme it can possibly get. To the point where a single fucking penny will drive him insane until he gets his grubby little hands on it. In case you haven't guessed yet, number 7 is Penny Foolish.
This episode isn't as painfully dumb as Cephalopod Lodge or Stuck in the Ringer, but in my mind, in terms of an episode, it's worse than every previous entry. The main reason is that the plot fucking sucks, and it's post-movie Krabs at his worst. While in the classic episodes, Mr. Krabs was a cheap son of a bitch, at least he was a person who did care about the other characters and was one of the funniest people on the show. The post-movie episodes have made him so cheap that he's a complete dick, even to the point where most people consider Krabs to be the real antagonist of the show now instead of Plankton, since he can never let Plankton have anything in life and goes batshit insane every time he tries to get money, and this episode is no exception to that. The episode revolves around Mr. Krabs spotting SpongeBob with a penny, and he becomes obsessed with the damn thing, to the point where all he can see is the penny. The next day, he tries to get the penny from him using various tactics, including building a theater where the admission is only 1 penny, doing a body search on SpongeBob for it, and breaking into his fucking house with a metal detector to find it.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Dude, it's just a penny. You want one so bad? Here, take one. There. Now calm the fuck down.
SpongeBob eventually finds Krabs in his house and tells him that it wasn't a penny, just a chewed up piece of gum for his collection that we've never seen or heard about before this. But after Krabs leaves, SpongeBob discovers that it's actually a $500 bill and throws it away. Alright then. However, it wasn't enough for Krabs. The episode ends with him digging up his yard searching for the penny. There's being cheap, and then there's being Mr. Krabs in this episode. His insanity just isn't funny, it's just dumb. And I know I've used that a lot, but it describes a good majority of the post-movie episodes to a T. They're just dumb. And this episode is no exception. It ruins Krabs' character and makes him seem like a complete psychopath. If him almost ripping off a man's arm for a coin was bad, this is the worst you can get.
Oh joy. Another Squidward torture porn.
Number 6 is Slide Whistle Stooges. The glorious thing about this episode is not only is it another horrible Squidward torture-filled episode, the episode is also filled with ear rape from beginning to end in the form of SpongeBob and Patrick's slide whistles.
Wonderful.
The episode revolves around SpongeBob and Patrick constantly annoying Squidward by playing their new slide whistles non-stop, to the point where they use the damn whistles as sound effects for everything Squidward is doing throughout the day. Squidward, being a normal person who would easily get pissed off by this, becomes increasingly annoyed and flees his house. SpongeBob, however, convinces Squidward that he has a good ear for music after breaking SpongeBob's slide whistle, and Squidward buys his own whistle and begins to annoy everyone in Bikini Bottom. Unfortunately, since this is Squidward we are talking about, it comes back to bite him in the ass and as he crashes a gasoline truck and ends up in the hospital with the slide whistle stuck in his throat. And since the doctors apparently don't have the technology to remove the whistle,
Bullshit!
they just leave the damn thing in his throat and the two idiots play their slide whistles around the hospital. The end. This episode is just fucking annoying. The sound of the slide whistles are completely obnoxious and are grating on the ears after just a minute or so of the episode. It's another one of those episodes where SpongeBob and Patrick can do anything and it's fine, but if Squidward even thinks of doing the same thing, he's gonna end up getting humiliated because the writers find it funny. Well, guess what? It's not funny and it never has been. Now please, stop doing it every fucking new episode!
This next episode is considered one of the meanest and cruelest pieces of shit shoved out of the new writer's ass and frequently tops worst of lists for this show. And for damn good reason.
A pal for Gary.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm using the same joke twice in one episode. You want to fight about it, tough guy?
It seems that the only episodes that tend to be worse than the Squidward torture porns are the Gary torture porns. Episodes like The Great Snail Race and Grooming Gary are tamer examples of this, even though the former is one of my favorite episodes. Despite the popular opinion of the fan base, but this episode manages to be far, far worse than those episodes that range from good to subpar at best. The episode manages to make every character as dumb as they possibly can be, and it makes SpongeBob, once everyone's favorite underwater sponge, the most detestable he quite possibly has ever been in an episode. After Mr. Krabs starts to allow pets in the Krusty Krab, due to Cheapy the Cheapskate not wanting to lose paying customers, of course, SpongeBob begins to feel bad that he leaves Gary at home while he's at work, something he's never thought of or mentioned before now, and he thinks Gary is incredibly lonely, which makes him guilty about it, even though Gary is shown to be clearly having a good time alone. To make things better for Gary while he's at work, SpongeBob buys another pet at a stand which he names Puffy Fluffy.
Yep, that's right. People were paid money to think of that name. Congrats, Nick. Your writing is so bad, even your names are cringeworthy now.
The owner warns SpongeBob that these pets can be very violent with other pets, but SpongeBob ignores her and brings home Gary, his new friend. As expected, the two pets don't get along, but SpongeBob suddenly decides to be a complete dick and blames Gary for everything Puffy Fluffy does, and the yellow idiot punches poor Gary. Later in the night, Gary awakens to the fluff ball now transformed into a giant monster tearing the house apart, and the monster attacks Gary. SpongeBob wakes up and for some reason tells Gary to put Puffy Fluffy down while Gary is about to be eaten alive by a fucking giant monster, and continues to do so while he's about to be eaten by it as well. Fucking new writers! Gary does his best Indiana Jones impression and saves the day, and SpongeBob then decides to take Gary to work with him now so he won't get lonely. Talk about a terrible episode. SpongeBob is so out of character in this episode it's not even funny. He has been a dick to Squidward many times in the post-movie episodes, but this is just terrible. The fact that by the end of the episode he still doesn't realize Puffy Fluffy is an evil monster that almost ate both Gary and himself makes him a complete fucking dumbass and jerk-ass at the same time. I can see why this is regarded as one of the worst SpongeBob episodes because, God, this episode pisses me off. The only good thing about this episode is the way SpongeBob says enchiladas.
Great! Now my enchiladas are cold.
That's it. One word is the only good thing about this. Fuck this episode.
Whoever wrote this episode should be ashamed of themselves for making this steaming pile of shit. In fact, let's check out who wrote this episode and see who's responsible for this. Wow, how am I not surprised?
A pal for Gary almost ruined SpongeBob as a character for me, and should be regarded as one of the worst. But the scary part is I find 4 episodes to be worse than this. It can only get worse from here.
I can never celebrate Leif Erikson Day again!
Number 4 is Dear Vikings, featuring quite possibly one of the worst plots in the show's history. The episode revolves around SpongeBob writing a letter to Vikings after becoming interested in what they're like when Mr. Krabs begins a Viking-sized promotion at the Krusty Krab. This doesn't seem too bad, except when you know for a fact SpongeBob does in fact know what Vikings are, since he celebrated Leif Erikson Day in Bubble Buddy almost 10 fucking years ago. Which, by the way, is one of the best jokes in the series. But since this is a post-movie episode where the new writers probably haven't seen any of the classic episodes, why shouldn't I be surprised? The Vikings receive SpongeBob's letter and arrive at the Krusty Krab to tell him about them, only to kidnap SpongeBob and Squidward and bring them onto their ship to make them part of their crew. The rest of the episode consists of a bunch of shitty jokes, including the fact that apparently everyone on the ship except one is named after Olaf from Frozen, until the ship starts to sink after hitting a rock. But of course, SpongeBob saves the day by plugging the boat with himself. Okay. And all is good for the Vikings who kidnapped him. The episode is just painful to watch. It's not as infuriating as A Pal for Gary or Cephalopod Lodge, but it's higher up because it's just unfunny for an episode that revolves around exclusively comedy. The plot is horrendous, almost all the jokes miss, and it's just plain terrible to watch. It's another episode considered to be the worst, and oh boy, do I agree.
P.S. Happy Leif Erikson Day! Yerger hinder dinger!
I'm gonna keep this next one short because there really isn't much to talk about here.
Face freeze. In another episode that reminds viewers that people are getting paid to write some of the worst crap ever, the episode revolves around SpongeBob and Patrick doing nothing but making silly faces all day. Some of which are pretty fucking creepy, by the way. Krabs warns them not to make the faces for too long, as their faces might freeze, but the two don't listen and decide to hold one of their faces while they sleep. Of course, when they wake up, their faces are frozen, and the rest of the episode is them trying to get their faces unfrozen, and somehow Krabs and Squidward get their faces frozen at the end as well. I just recently saw this episode, and it just had to be on here. There is no plot at all. It's just the characters making some of the most disturbing faces I've ever seen. That's it. If the episode was funny, it would get a pass, but since it isn't, it gets a spot on this list. It's a poor man's Hooky or Sailor Mouth without the charm those two episodes had. I saw it once, and I never want to see it again.
Like I've said before, most people will agree that after the movie, the show began its decline in quality to where it is now. People tend to have their own points of when they feel the show began its decline, but I can tell you right now the exact date the show began to decline in quality. And that date is May 20th, 2005, the day Good Neighbors premiered.
The amount of hate I have developed for this episode over the years is unbelievable. When it first came out, I thought it was a decent episode, probably because its sister episode, Skill Crane, is one of the best post-movie episodes in my mind. So that's probably a big reason for why I didn't mind this at first. But as the years went on, I have began to hate everything about this episode, and to me is the episode where SpongeBob jumped the shark. Like I mentioned before, I still think around 2007 was the point where the show began to suck, but this was the episode that started the downfall of one of my favorite shows. The episode revolves around Squidward trying to relax and enjoy his Sunday afternoon, but of course, SpongeBob and Patrick won't let that happen and decide to make Squidward the president of their Good Neighbor Club.
Oh man, if you thought I hated that other post-movie episode about Squidward joining the club, that is nothing compared to this.
So the two idiots make their club, complete with fezzes, and Squidward makes them do tedious tasks so he can be left alone on his Sunday. But of course, they manage to screw that up multiple times. After a whole day of not being able to be left alone on his day off, Squidward has enough and installs a security system in his house to get rid of SpongeBob and Patrick. But unfortunately for him, the system malfunctioned and kicks Squidward's out of his house. The security system takes control of Squidward's house and begins attacking the city, leaving the mayor to give Squidward community service for the damage he caused, even though SpongeBob and Patrick were in his house the whole fucking time and were responsible for everything. Yeah! Fuck this episode! This episode is when the Squidward torture porn started to become a regular staple in SpongeBob's episodes. And this one is just one of the meanest, cruelest, and just plain unfair of them all. All Squidward wanted to do was enjoy one day to himself, but that can never happen when he lives next door to SpongeBob and Patrick, can it? I hate this episode. I hate it so much I don't even want to talk about it anymore because I'll just get too angry. But there is still one episode I hate more than this one. So before we can crown the worst episode in SpongeBob history, let's recap. Number 10, The Splinter. Number 9, Stuck in the Ringer. Number 8, Cephalopod Lodge. Number 7, Penny Foolish. Number 6, Slide Whistle Stooges. Number 5, A Pal for Gary. Number 4, Dear Vikings. Number 3, Face Freeze. And number 2, Good Neighbors.
Alright, before number 1, let's go over a few dishonorable mentions. These episodes still suck big time, but aren't bad enough to make it on my top 10 worst list. So, let's start those off.
First off is Squeaky Boots.
Well, I did warn you that pre-movie episodes could be on here, so this is really no shock.
Yes, Squeaky Boots is the first and only pre-movie episode to be talked about in this video. I have never liked this episode in my life. I have always disliked it. To me, it's what the ear rape episode of the series was before Slide Whistle Stooges came out, and that's not a good title to give an episode. The episode revolves around Mr. Krabs giving SpongeBob his old pair of boots, but the constant squeaking of the boots makes Krabs go insane, and tries to steal the boots to stop the squeaking. The damn sound of the squeaking boots still haunts me to this day. I've never liked this episode, and it's one of the few pre-movie episodes I generally dislike, but it's not bad enough to make my top 10. Trench Billies. Part of the poorly received Legends of Bikini Bottom series of episodes, this one is often regarded as the worst of the bunch, mainly because of how weird and unappealing it is, and contains the worst stereotype of rednecks ever shown on TV. Okay, second worst stereotype of rednecks. SpongeBob and Patrick fall into a trench and stumble upon a village inhabited by a backwoods family.
We're here.
Not that one. The leader of the Trench Billies makes SpongeBob and Patrick compete in a series of redneck challenges as an initiation, including a banjo contest, a hootin' and hollering contest, and good old wrestling. SpongeBob and Patrick get accepted into the group due to showing the leader how to jellyfish, but when they try to escape, they are told they need to take care of the leader for the rest of their lives. At the end, though, they manage to escape from the trench without explanation and feed all the Trench Billies Krabby Patties. This episode is just a bad mix between Rock Bottom and Born to Be Wild, and it's just unpleasing to watch. Spongehenge. Ugh. This episode for a while was my least favorite episode of the show because it's just so boring, and the ending is just plain weird. However, I can't put it on my main list because it really has no plot. SpongeBob begins to attract jellyfish due to his holes whistling in the wind and tries to stop it. That's it. If it had the tiniest bit of plot, it would be on the list. But it doesn't, so it's not. To Love a Patty. This is one of the weirdest and most loathed episodes of the entire series because the plot of this episode is that SpongeBob falls in love with a Krabby Patty and holds onto it for days, leading to some pretty gross imagery at the end of the episode. I don't hate it as much as everyone else, and the song, when you think in your mind that it's not directed to a sandwich, is pretty good, but the episode is still bad nonetheless. Whatever Happened to SpongeBob is one of the worst half-hour specials the show has ever put out. The plot is that everyone calls SpongeBob an idiot, so he gets depressed and leaves town. However, he has an accident while leaving town and suffers amnesia, but somehow manages to defeat a gang in the town he traveled to and becomes mayor of the city, while SpongeBob's friends go on a search to find him after his disappearance. This episode is just one of those ones where it is cruel to SpongeBob for no reason, which should happen in the ones where you know he deserves it. Add to the shit plot and resolution, and a waste of a cameo from Ray Liotta, and you've got a terrible special that just missed out on being on this list. Plankton's Regular is probably the cruelest treatment Plankton has gotten in the post-movie episodes, especially since he did nothing to deserve this treatment during the episode. A customer begins to keep coming to the chum bucket, and Mr. Krabs tries to stop it at all costs because Plankton can't get one customer in this rivalry. Fuck you. When Krabs and SpongeBob fail to convert his customer over to the Krusty Krab, the customer reveals that he was bribed by Karen to pretend to like Plankton's food and gets sent to the hospital, and the episode ends with Plankton crying and Krabs laughing in his misery. You know, when Plankton acts like a villain, he deserves the poor treatment, but this is just unnecessarily mean, even for what is supposed to be the main villain. Krabs just looks even more like the villain than ever. Fuck the post-movie episodes. Nautical Novice is an episode that easily could have been one of the best post-movie episodes, but by episode's end, ends up being one of the worst. SpongeBob tries to impress Mrs. Puff at the field trip to the boating museum and spends all night learning the history of boating. However, this knowledge annoys Mrs. Puff as he's teaching the class more than she is, but she ends up giving SpongeBob his license at the end of the episode when he saves the museum, which is actually a giant ship, from crashing due to his new knowledge of boating. Until it is revealed in one of the worst endings ever that someone was just pulling the boat and SpongeBob wasn't doing shit, revoking his driver's license. You know, if the episode ended with SpongeBob finally getting his license and actually changing something up with the show, It would have been one of the best episodes, but the ending ruins it completely and almost put it on my worst of list. Thanks a lot, new writers. SpongeBob You're Fired is not only one of the worst specials, but also one of the worst episodes I've seen in quite a while. I actually caught the premiere of this episode when it was hyped up, and man, this episode blows. The premise alone, Krabs firing SpongeBob to save a nickel, and Patrick teaching him the wonders of unemployment is enough to guarantee this episode would suck, but they managed to just make it a painful viewing from start to finish. Every time he gets hired at a new job, all he can make is Krabby Patties, and by the end of the episode he has his job back again. There was no point for this episode. We all knew what would happen at the end, so it was just completely pointless. If anything, Krabs should be arrested for severely underpaying his employees, but that's none of my business.
That's it for the dishonorable mentions. Now it's time for the worst of the worst. What can be worse than a really bad Squidward torture porn? That's easy. And even worse Squidward torture porn. Fucking boning buddies, everyone.
I know some of you were expecting something like One Course Meal or Little Yellow Book.
And there you have it. The 10 worst episodes of SpongeBob. It's a shame that one of my favorite shows of all time has turned into this unfunny, annoying piece of shit that it is now. But it still doesn't change the fact that it is one of my favorite shows ever. And through the good times and the bad times, it will always have a place in my heart. So, with that said, leave your top 10 worst SpongeBob episodes in the comments. I'll be really interested in reading those. And I am finally done with this. This is one half of Galactic Reviews Inc., the Uncommon SBF. And after all this negative, I really need something positive next. Take care, guys.
Yeah, those feather buddies better hope they don't run into us in a dark alley.